Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers. We are still going through the entire GameCube library and picking out some of the games that tend to be overlooked, despite the system not having the biggest selection of games to begin with. Some of these letters are tough, mainly as there aren't too many games to choose from, but once again I'm quite confident there'll be at least a couple of games here that you might have missed out on. So how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button and we take a look at some games. First up is Pitfall, the Lost Expedition. I believe this is still the most recent entry in the Pitfall series that started way back in the arcades and on the Atari. Now it's a 3D platform game where you play as Pitfall Harry, a jungle explorer. You've been hired by a rich bloke to help find some treasure on a remote island that's filled with all sorts of perils. The game is presented as a large open world and interestingly kind of plays like a Metroidvania. You need to explore the jungles, caves, rapids and ancient towns to try and track down the treasure, as well as finding the other members of your party that you managed to lose after your plane crashed. But it's okay, they all survived. As you explore though, you'll find lots of areas you can't reach. And what's nice is that Harry will mark these on his map, as well as telling you what you might need to get there. For example, you might need some form of light or fire to burn through something, a way to jump higher to reach a ledge, or a gas mask to get through some smoke, that sort of thing. So you keep exploring the jungles looking for these items so you can get to the new areas, and honestly it's really damn fun. Treasure is the main thing you want to find, and there are these little idols dotted around all over the place. These are important as you can give them to the local shaman who will then teach you new attacks or techniques to get around. These are often required for reaching the new areas as well. Being a 3D platform game, you'll often see an idol but then have to figure out how to actually get to it and might need to come back a bit later. Often you need to do some pretty perilous platforming, and that's where the game really likes to show its roots. You've got plenty of vines to swing on and jump from, you'll have to dodge giant holes in the ground that open and close and even have teeth. And yep, if you see crocodiles, they're not just dangerous, but actually platforms you can jump on, but don't take too long or they'll get annoyed and eat you. It's all great and a good throwback to the original. There are enemies here as well, mostly the local tribespeople who, quite rightly, don't take too kindly to you turning up, crashing your plane into their homes and then starting to steal their shit. Yet somehow they're still the bad guys. You'll also need to fight a lot of the local wildlife. You've got a few punches and kicks and you'll find some weapons like a slingshot as you progress. Graphics wise, I think it looks brilliant. It's got excellent cartoony style and the animation is fantastic. A lot of effort has clearly gone into the game and it's one that's just really enjoyable to play. The main downside though is the camera and some of the controls. The game tries to be new here by having the C stick move your right arm. This is used for grabbing things or if you're holding an item to use it. This means the camera is done by using the shoulder buttons and doesn't give you the kind of freedom that you really need. The whole C stick controlling your arm really isn't needed, though it does work fine I suppose. This is a game that I've owned since it was released, but I don't know a single other person that's even played it. I actually really like it, and you can even unlock the original game as a bonus. Definitely one to check out. Here is PN03, probably one of the more well-known games shown here today. It's from Capcom, and you play as Vanessa, a super cool and sexy woman that's been hired by a mystery person to infiltrate an evil company and destroy their evil robots. Simple enough. The person you hired won't reveal their identity to you though, but it didn't take me long to figure out who it was, because I'm a smart. The game itself is actually kind of strange. Well, not strange exactly, it's just not what I was expecting, especially when I bought it, you guessed it, way back in the day. It's essentially an arcade-style third-person shooter that I really think is just one step away from being a rail shooter. You control Vanessa through some quite linear levels, which are mostly enemy buildings. You have a main objective, which is usually to destroy something found in the building. So you just explore every room and corridor until you find it, and then you blow it up. Simple. Almost every room you enter, you'll see a bunch of enemies spawn in. These are all robots that range from ones that just sort of get in the way, to others that take a ton of shots to blow up and can kill you instantly. And that's basically where the meat of the game comes into play. Vanessa has hand laser things that can fire like Iron Man. When enemies are around you, she'll automatically target one of them and you just have to hammer the attack button until it's destroyed, and then you target the next one and so on. However, you will want to press the handy X button sometimes, as this lets you switch between the enemies, and you really want to pay attention to the order you take enemies out, or at least I did. For me, I would either get rid of the weak ones as quickly as possible, so they were just out of the way. But sometimes you will want to focus on the big guys first, as they can charge a massive shot that kills you in one hit, so you don't want to be focused on the little idiots just getting in the way and distracting you. Something to keep in mind is that you can't attack and move at the same time, so when you're shooting you're left wide open. Timing is everything here, which is kind of emphasised by the fact that Vanessa seems to be listening to music the whole time and is dancing along to the beat whenever she's standing still. I actually really like this touch. But you're not defenceless. Pressing the shoulder buttons lets you dodge enemy attacks, which you can always see by the way, and you can also jump and roll, which you'll need to use as well. Some corridors have lasers in them that will hurt you. This is where most of the jumping and rolling comes in handy. Killing enemies gets you points, which is also your currency. At various points you can upgrade your health, shield and attack power. You can even buy new suits that have different stats, which is cool, and killing enemies in quick succession gives you higher combos and more points. You can even get special attacks, which are done by inputting a command on the D-pad, like pressing left, right, up and then the attack button. These can be cumbersome to do, but it's well worth it as they're generally very powerful and can take out multiple enemies at once. If you do die, you're often taken back quite far, which is a bit of a pain, but the levels are never all that long. Graphics wise, it looks great. Capcom did some of the best looking games on the system, and this is possibly up there with them. It's got a really cool style, though it definitely could have done with some variation. Most levels look basically the same, and it can be easy to get lost as all the corridors are also similar. And that's about it. It's a simple game. I was expecting a proper action game when I first bought it, and actually didn't really like it to begin with. But when you realise that it's more of a timing based arcade shooter, not a massive adventure, you realise that it's actually a lot of fun and very unique. If you'd rather shoot some pool than robots, then check out Pool Paradise, another game my friends and I spent an alarming amount of time playing in college. Shockingly, it's a game where you play a lot of pool, and some billiards. The game starts with you meeting a loan shark who, quite hilariously, is an actual shark. He lends you some money, and then you go to a very nice island. From here you basically have the option to play a whole bunch of different types of pool, far more than I know the rules of. There's US and UK rules, billiards, 8-ball, 9-ball and some more as well. You can choose to play a single game or take part in tournaments and challenges, and there's a few places to practice your shots as well. Actually playing the game is easy. You just aim your shots, then hold the A button and use the analog stick to push and pull your cue, so you can dictate the power. It works well. You can also use the D-pad to move the little blue dot around. This is basically where you hit the ball with your cue, and it's important to actually use this to put spin on it to stop it from rolling too far in any direction after you've hit it and to set up your next shot. If you're a pro like me at real pool, it all makes sense. And no, I'm not a pro, but I do like a game every now and then. The physics here are pretty much spot on, and it's a game that's easy to pick up and play. Now what you really want to do here is take part in the challenges and tournaments. These are always against computer opponents, and you've got to do a buy-in to take part, hence needing the loan at the start of the game. There is a nice mix of various types of rules, and it forces you to play the ones that you're not familiar with, which is nice, and it's actually a cool way to learn some new games. The computer opponents range in difficulty, with some being crap and missing most of their shots, but the tougher ones of course rarely miss and are punishing you if you mess up. But the better the opponent, the more money you win. And this money can be used to buy a whole load of stuff. There's cosmetic things like new cues or skins for the pool tables themselves, or you can even buy accessories like a laser sight or goggles that show you various things and make your shots easier to take. You can even buy mini games like darts, skee ball and even the Drop Zone arcade game to play. And what's really cool is that you can buy crazy tables. These are pool tables that come in a bunch of random shapes like an L shape or a plus or a hexagon. These are fun to play on and actually make things quite different. They are all quite expensive though, so you will need to save up. What's nice is that you can actually replay events, so if you're not great at the game, you can just playing against the crapper characters, but of course it will take you longer to earn enough money to buy the stuff, but at least it is still doable. The graphics here are fine, it's nothing really special, it's just pool. You don't actually see any of the other characters, which is a bit of a shame, they're just disembodied hands. But I do like that it's all bright and colourful, rather than being set in a dark, dingy pool hall. And I've got to say, I really like the music here. This is genuinely a relaxing game that is fun to play with friends that maybe don't play a lot of video games. Well worth checking out. It's pretty cheap now, and I really think you'll get more out of it than you'd expect. More sports now with Quiddich World Cup, which is the only game I could see on the GameCube that actually starts with a Q. And technically it starts with an H, as it's Harry Potter Quidditch World Cup. Oh well. Time for a bombshell. I've never seen any of the Harry Potter stuff. I've nothing against it, I've just never been that fussed. But enough of it has been shoved down our throats that I'm well aware of Quidditch and what it is, though I never really knew the actual rules. Well, this game definitely helped with that. Now, I'm fairly sure most of you will probably know infinitely more than I ever will about this, so apologies if I get some of this wrong. But the main aim of Quidditch is to fly around on your broomstick, trying to get hold of the Scrobble while the Floofles do the grabbing and the Golden Glorble appears and you have to scrundle after it and get points. That is basically what I heard when you're doing the tutorial for this, but the game can be summed up a bit easier than that. Grab the red thing and throw it through your opponent's goals. Eventually another thing will appear, be the first to grab it and you win the game. And actually, I thought this game was really fun. The training does actually do a really good job of teaching you the basics, and it is easy to pick up and play. You can choose from the 4 houses, which have the characters from the film in them, I believe. Eventually though, you'll unlock a World Cup mode, where you'll choose a country to represent and then get your Quidditch on. The controls are easy, you fly around with the analog stick. You don't actually have to worry about flying up and down, which I think was a good decision. You just need to worry about forwards, backwards, left and right. You've got a button to tackle, a button to pass, a button to shoot and a button to throw your bludger, which is basically a projectile attack. If you play well, your team will be able to use special trick shots that are basically unblockable. You've also got some magic you can use that has various effects like slowing your opponents or stunning them. Scoring is pretty easy. When you're close to the goal, you'll see one highlighted. This is the one that you're aiming at, but you can just move the analog stick to a different one and you'll shoot at that one. You can tap B for a quick shot or hold it down for a faster, more powerful one that's harder for them to block. Though I do have to say that one of the things I found with the game is that it is really easy. When I was playing, the opponents only scored past me 2 or 3 times, and that's usually because I was messing around after being about 200 points in their lead. But I haven't finished the World Cup yet, so I assume they get harder. Eventually the Golden Snitch will appear. How exciting. At this point the game turns into basically a one-on-one race. There's a trail behind the snitch that builds your boost meter. You and a player from the other team have to race to grab the snitch, and basically the more points you've scored during the game, the bigger your boost bar, giving you the advantage. It all looks good here. The character models are decent with some nice animation, though there are some freaky mouths in there. The voice acting is pretty crap though, with some really awful attempts at accents from the various countries. I don't really get why these people don't just get voice actors from those countries rather than do borderline racist attempts at them. Oh well, it's good for a laugh. And this game is just good fun as it is. It's not the most challenging one out there, but it is a nice pick up and play game that I would actually really like to try with a few friends. And now we're about halfway through the episode, which means it's time for
Comment of the week, this week's top comment.
That's right, it's time for Comment of the Week from last week's video, which was my top 10 Game Boy Advance games. And this week's comment goes to Leviathan, who said, "So, I don't know how much you care about Ballistic X vs. Sever movie. I couldn't guess as to whether you like it, have ever seen it, or have even the slightest interest or information about it. But, regardless, there's actually an interesting behind the scenes story as to how the movie became such a train wreck. And it comes with a lot of information about the movie we could have gotten, and how when studio meddling got in the way, it really robbed us of what sounds like it could have been something special. There's a really good video on it by Suspect Green called, appropriately, The Worst Movie Ever. I recommend you give it a watch no matter what, because even if you don't give a single shit about the movie itself, it is an interesting video full of some surprising, if maybe haunting facts about the sabotage development of the film." Well, thank you very much for the comment, and you know what? I did actually watch the video, and you're right, it is damn good, and I highly recommend everyone else does too. Thanks very much. Now back to the games. ATV Quad Power Racing 2 doesn't quite start with Q, but it's got one in it, so that counts for this. This is actually a really fun arcade racing game that I ended up playing for quite a while. It's a fairly simple racing game, though not in a bad way. You just choose from the bunch of 2000s edgy characters, and then you take part in a bunch of racing championships across a bunch of locations. You'll be on beaches, in forests, construction yards, and, well, not a whole lot more. But there are various tracks based on these locations, and they're all more than interesting enough, and they're better than I made them sound. Winning races lets you buy new quad bikes to ride around on, and yep, they all have their own different stats. The courses themselves are actually quite long, and the laps take a few minutes each to get around. Because of this, you usually only have to worry about racing around 2 laps, which is good and means that the races don't outstay their welcome. As it's all off-road, you really need to keep your eye on the terrain. There's bumps in the road all over the place, as well as large jumps. You've got to make sure that you orient your bike when you're going over these, as if you land awkwardly, you might lose a lot of speed, or even worse, you'll bail and go flying, losing a place or 2. Races have 8 people taking part, and the AI here is tough but fair. It wasn't easy to win every race, but it's definitely possible. Some of the later courses really make you pick your equipment to be best suited to the terrain, which is nice, and I never felt that the computer opponents cheated. They were good, but you'd still see them make mistakes every now and then. But if you do want them to crash, you can press the handy Z button to kick. You'll automatically kick in the direction of the nearest opponent and can knock them off their bikes. But you have to be careful, as the size of some of the bikes is different and you'll often have to get really close and risk knocking yourself off in due course. I did this a lot, so don't be tempted to kick everyone all the time. Pick your battles. As well as kicking and racing, you can also do a number of tricks for extra points and cash. There's some game modes dedicated to getting high scores as well, which are fun, but it's definitely worth doing the training to get used to how it all works, as I didn't think it was that intuitive. The graphics here are decent enough, basically what you'd expect for a game like this from the era. They won't blow you away, but they work well enough. And it all does run very smoothly. I never actually experienced any performance issues. The soundtrack is also very good, if you like 2000s rock and metal that is. I do, so had a good time with it, and there's plenty of licensed music for you to listen to while you play. Definitely a fun game here. It only supports 2 players, which is a shame, but it is really worth playing with a couple of friends. Next is Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 3, Night of the Quincan, another game that doesn't start with a Q, but has one in it. Also, this is the obligatory game in the series where I record 2 hours of footage, only to realise I forgot to actually press the record button. Great. Still, I was having fun with the game, so I didn't mind playing a bit more. So this is the third in the Ty series. Before this, I'd only played the first one, which I enjoyed, but don't think I ever actually finished. The third one is similar, but not the same. It's a 3D platform game where you play as Ty, a Tasmanian tiger. He's part of a bush animal rescue squad, and one day some weird stuff happens and a bunch of your mates go missing. Then you end up in another dimension where there are different versions of you, but they're still good. Oh, and there's zombie animals, they're all over the place as well. Turns out these evil creatures called Quincans have been causing all sorts of havoc, so you grab your boomerangs and set out to help. It's a 3D platformer, but it does have a few other game styles thrown in for good measure. Unlike a lot of the ones from this era, it's not about collecting everything you see, although there is plenty to collect. Instead, you have actual missions to complete. These involve rescuing animals, going out and finding items and equipment, and most importantly, killing evil monsters. Ty has his boomerangs as weapons, and you have 2 that you can throw and will collect various different ones as you play, each with different properties when it comes to speed, power and range. What's nice is that you can also find elemental stones that you can add to them which give other properties, so if you want flaming boomerangs or ice boomerangs, you absolutely can. The platforming levels are fun, and you'll be doing a lot of jumping and collecting stuff as you complete your objectives. There's plenty of enemies to fight, and these have different weaknesses, so you might need to swap around your different weapons or elemental powers as you go. The game also has a big focus on mechs for some reason. It seemed to be a real thing at the time. Throughout the game you get to take control of a few different ones that you'll use to punch enemies in the face. These are much stronger of course and make light work of what are often some quite tricky enemies. Collecting the red orbs is important when they drop them, as these are your currency. You can use these to buy new equipment and weapons, not just for Ty but also the mechs that you've unlocked, giving them much more powerful arsenal. You even get racing levels. These are fun but some can be hard to control, and there's even flying levels which I actually really liked, and you're in a plane. These are simple, but the game does a great job of mixing things up. The levels themselves are never huge. You do have a hub world to explore, and the levels you can enter are marked on there for you. You can replay old ones with new mechs as well at times, and you get slightly different objectives. Something that is a bit of a pain in the ass though is that when you die, you do actually get sent back quite far. There are checkpoints, but there's times where they weren't quite close enough together for my liking, especially on the later levels. But stick with it and you'll make it through. It's not the toughest game out there. It all controls well enough, though the camera is a bit crappy at times, and I never felt I had full control over it like I would have liked. It was often a bit too close all the time. It all looks decent enough though. I actually really like all the character designs, and I really like 3D platform games as it is. The levels are what you'd expect, from the Aussie outback to flaming fields, icy tundras and the usual platform stuff. The Ty series as a whole definitely has its fans, but not a whole load of people seem to have actually played it. I do recommend trying them out though. Rampage Total Destruction was, at the time, the most modern update to the classic Rampage series. It's a simple series with a simple premise that's actually good fun. Basically, you choose from a whole host of characters, all of which used to be human, but they've been transformed into big monsters and now are on a rampage, smashing up cities all over the world. Honestly, the story doesn't really matter and is barely mentioned. This is just arcade action through and through. You pick your favourite creepy thing, each of which has its own various stats, and then you're thrown into a whole load of levels, hundreds in fact. Your goal in all of them is just to smash all the buildings within the time limit. To do this, you can punch, kick and grab. You need to go to building to smash them to bits. Most of the buildings are pretty high, so thankfully you can climb them, letting you reach the areas you otherwise can't get to. Climbing is easy and you just walk into the side of whatever you want to smash. It's actually really important to smash as many of the windows on the buildings as you can though, as they often contain items. You'll find things that just give you points, as well as items to replenish your health, items that put you in Rampage mode where you're faster and do more damage, and that sort of thing. But you also have to be careful as there are bad items as well, like cactus or chili, which when you eat them will hurt you, just like me when I have a curry. As well as this, you might find new characters hidden in the buildings, and I couldn't believe it, but there's more than 20 monsters to unlock, all getting crazier as you go. It's great, and I really like seeing all the new monster designs. What I also really like is that you can change monsters between stages, which makes recording footage nice and easy. Levels also give you the option to complete challenges. These are usually to eat a certain number of something or smash certain vehicles, etc. Doing these challenges unlocks new special attacks for your monster and can boost their stats, so it is worth doing them and is a good incentive to replay as all the monsters. But you do have to be careful as the authorities aren't going to let you do all this with no repercussions. You start out with the local police trying to stop you with their puny guns, but that's okay as they barely tickle, and you can eat as many humans as you want. You can also pick up the cars driving past and throw them around. Eventually though, the army will be after you, and as you progress, they get bigger and much more powerful artillery to try and take you down. But if you've been completing the challenges, you should be alright. The game looks decent enough though. It's certainly nothing special, and it does look like a budget game, but that's okay. I do really like the designs of the monsters, they all look great, and I loved unlocking the new ones. The gameplay is very repetitive though, you literally see everything the game has to offer after you've played the first level. But still, this is great mindless fun, and it's especially fun with a few friends. You can save your progress too, so you don't have to do the whole thing in one sitting. If you're a fan of the original, you'll definitely get a kick out of this one. Here's one that a few of you might know about, but certainly not enough of you. It's Red Faction 2. This is a very fun first-person shooter for the system. You play as the edgily named Alias, a demolitions expert who's been brought in to help find some nanotech that an evil bunch of bastards have got their hands on and are doing naughty things with. It's one of those stories that, if you ask me, takes itself way too seriously, but that's fine, as the gameplay is really fun. It's a pretty linear game, so you really just have to worry about getting from A to B on the levels, completing some basic objectives along the way. Most of the game takes place in enemy bases, and I was hoping for some more outdoor environments, but actually there's kind of a reason for that. This is one of the first games to introduce proper scenery damage, so basically if you have a weapon powerful enough, you can blow holes in most walls and create your own paths through levels. This is really fun to do. As you're making your way through the level, looking for your objectives, you might come across a blocked passageway. Just get your assault rifle out with its grenade launcher secondary fire and shoot a wall, then you've got a hole to walk through. Great. Or one section that I really liked that had motion sensor gun turrets in it. If you just backtrack a little way, you can find a wall that you can blow a hole in an adjacent room so the motion sensors are facing the wrong way. It was really fun to do this. There's also a lot of human enemies for you to take down in the levels. These guys can be a pain in the ass, and you can't take a whole lot of damage, so try to stay near some cover and don't blow it all up. The enemies aren't all that smart though, so they will tend to just sort of stand around, or at a push they'll run away from you when you're attacking, and you do have a decent selection of weapons to kill them with. You've got a number of the usual types of weapon, as well as some unique pistols, machine guns and laser weapons. It's all kind of futuristic, and I think it takes place on Mars, though I did get a little confused. Maybe that's one of the later games in the series, so don't quote me on that. The weapons are all fun to use and usually have a secondary fire mode. Many of them can even be dual wielded. I do have to say though that the game does something I really kind of hate in first person shooters, which is that most of the time enemies just don't react to being shot, and there's no real indication or any blood, so you don't really know when you actually hit them. Quite often the only time I knew I was doing something is when they'd fall to the floor dead. And sometimes they take way too many hits and the gunfights can take a while, though that's where the explosives come in. They sort it all out. Despite my gripes though, the gameplay is really fun. The controls are decent and the action is often fast and frantic. The game also has an all-star cast for the voice actors. You've got Lance Henriksen, aka Bishop from Aliens, and none other than Jason Statham as your best mate, a character that couldn't look further from the kind of voice that they've given him. He is suitably terrible in his role as well, so keeps his familiar standards. I know you're probably bored of me saying this, but this is another game that I played a lot with my friends. And yes, I do have a lot of GameCube games. That's because the multiplayer here is fantastic and we spent hours shooting each other and blowing up walls. It was great. You can also include bots in the multiplayer, and I will always remember that there was one particular bot that was called Owns You, and yes, it used to kick our asses, and we still reference that bot to this day when playing multiplayer. Overall, this is just a solid first-person shooter that doesn't quite feel as polished as it could do, but it's still a lot of fun and has some unique things in there. If you're bored of playing Time Splitters 2, which I know is impossible, but bear with me, then this is well worth a look. And finally for today, here is Ribbit King. This is your classic game of frolf. You know, golf, but instead of hitting a ball, you hit a frog. Well, okay, you don't actually hit the frog. The frog is on a catapult that you hit to send it flying towards the hole. Believe it or not, there is actually a wacky story here. Your planet is literally falling apart, and you need some super ribbonite in order to fix it. Sadly, this is a very rare commodity, but thankfully there is a tournament taking place across the galaxy, and the prize happens to be enough of the stuff to fix your planet. So off you fly to a bunch of different planets, playing frolf against their inhabitants, and if you beat them all, you'll win the tournament and save your planet. So, how do you play frolf? Well, it is literally golf. You have to time your power presses to hit your frog across a large course and into a hole with a diamond above it. However, it's not just a case of being the first to get your frog in the hole, as points are awarded for the various things that happen throughout the courses as you play, and it's actually the person with the most points after both frogs are in the hole that wins. Being the first player in the hole does get you a lot more points, but also on the course you'll see point bubbles. Landing in these gives you the amount advertised on them. Also, there's water. Getting your frog into the water to swim gets you more points, though only very few, so don't rely on this. There's also other bonus pads that give you points, or sometimes even take them away depending on what they are, like if you go out of bounds or land on one of the less friendly animals that are wandering around. There's also flies on the course, and as we all know, frogs love flies, so if you land near one of them, your frog will automatically jump towards it and eat it, bagging you some points. However, you have to be careful, as the fly might not be in the direction you want to go and could cause all sorts of havoc. In fact, it's very possible to hit your frog, have it land near a fly, which makes you jump into a teleport. That teleports you near a monster, the monster will eat you and spit you out of bounds, and then you end up further back behind the starting point, and you're in 0 points. I know this from experience. Likewise, you can go completely the opposite way, and a series of good events can happen and you end up doing an awesome combo by accident that bags you tons of points and you end up right near the hole. This also happened. Doing all of this is super easy. You just aim where you want to hit your frog and the power bar automatically adjusts, so you always need to try and hit it as close to the top of the bar as possible. This is great and makes such a fun pick up and play game. You also earn money along the way, and you can buy new frogs as well as items that let you hit your frog further, or have them ignore hazards and flies, or give more points, that sort of thing. The game looks really good, the graphics are basic, but it's a style choice and it's just very charming and fun. And the gameplay is also simple but really damn addictive, and I had an absolute blast playing this, and I've already got it planned in for a games night with some friends. This is a great game that even people who don't play video games will enjoy. Definitely check it out. So there you go, another bunch of GameCube games that you might not have heard of, and if you say you've heard of any of them, you're a liar and I hate you. As always, let me know what other games I could have included. I want to say a big thank you to my sexy patron, and if you want reviews too hot for YouTube, podcasts and gaming challenges for just $1 a month, then why not check out my Patreon? You won't be disappointed. On screen now you can see where else you can follow me, so why not do so? I've got loads of great content for everyone to enjoy. And now, all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.